everybody. This is Mike with the Mountain Weekly News. Welcome back to the Everything Snowboarding and More podcast. This is episode number 35. This week's episode is being brought to you by Spark R&D. Spark R&D is my personal favorite binding for reliability, for going uphill, a really solid splitboard binding. So if you're interested in more information about Spark R&D, head over to sparkrnd.com. This week's special guest is Jeremy Jones. Jeremy Jones is a big mountain snowboarder, founder of Jones Snowboards, and Protect Our Winters as well. So I'm very excited to have Jeremy on the show. It's kind of a long episode with Jeremy, so we're just going to kick it off. Thanks again for tuning in, episode number 35 of the Everything Snowboarding and More podcast. All right, let's kick this off. So, Jeremy, what are you doing? Tonight is Halloween 2019. What does Jeremy Jones and the Jones clan do for Halloween night?
Well, I sent my kids out the door, one as Saucer Boy and the other as Winter, and then we will kind of run around. We'll go trick-or-treating in the neighborhood when it gets dark. And other than that, it's kind of a normal day. I do not have my costume figured out, but I will by the time it's time to go trick-or-treating.
And you mentioned Shane McConkey. What was your relationship to Shane and Saucer Boy?
So Shane and I became really close through our wives, and my wife Tiffany and Sherry are really close, and then we had daughters at the same time, and so we really bonded up around being new dads, basically. And so our kids would be in the same ballet class and same my playground type classes. And so, yeah, it was a real, I rode with them plenty on the hill, but it would be more with riding with our wives type deal. But it's largely based around being fathers.
And so you live out in Lake Tahoe. You've got a pretty tight community there. Is there a reason that you picked Lake Tahoe out of anywhere in the world that Jeremy Jones can live? Is it for that sense of community?
Yeah, I mean, I've, really enjoyed living here for various reasons. I think access to the coast and the lakes, and I enjoyed the Sierra. But definitely when I had kids, I really appreciated the community. A lot of my friends had kids at the same time, and I saw the benefits of just being around families with similar ethos and at that same stage in life. And it became really clear that I'm definitely raising my kids here. And I may live here forever, but it's obvious really fast that it was this is the perfect spot to, raise kids.
Family first, right?
Yeah.
You had a pretty long career with Rossignol Snowboards and then started your own brand, Jones Snowboards. How did you come to decide on starting your own company?
Well, I went to my first competition, and I was on a beat-up Sims Switchblade, and Rossignol was demoing snowboards. Their very first batch of snowboards had come into the U.S. They were based out of Vermont at that point. And they showed up to their very first demo, and I'm like, I could use some edges, and demoed this board, and I won the race, and I got third in the half pipe, and they were like, wow, that's, I brought it back at the end of the day, and he's like, how'd you do? And I'm like, I won, and he's like, wow, that's cool. Let me, maybe you can keep the board. And then he made a call, and he's like, you can keep the board. And I was super psyched. It was an all-black Rossignol test board, and then that started a long relationship.
That's epic. And did you have a background in skiing before?
I did. I grew up, basically my grandfather found Vermont, which coming from Cape Cod, that was a big move. Not many people move off the Cape. And then my parents fell in love with skiing later in life, and they didn't grow up skiing. And then they brought us, they really embraced Vermont, and we followed along. And next thing they knew, my brothers and I were going west as fast as possible and not coming back.
So where was the first place you ever slid on snow? Was that out in Vermont, Stowe, or maybe Cape Cod?
Yeah, that was Stowe, Vermont. Started skiing young. I think I was 4. And Then I saw Burton Backhill at the basement of a general store in Vermont when I was 9. That moved to the top of my Christmas list and was super excited because I was skateboarding at that time. I was really into skateboarding, just kind of embraced the whole sideways lifestyle and had been really waiting for snowboarding coming around. And I started seeing pictures of it in skate mags and I'm like, that's what I want to do. Got on the Burton Backhill and basically flailed on hard snow for years. Was able to ride it in powder right away. But hardpack was impossible because there was no videos to see anyone snowboarding. There was no, you used to fully teach yourself. And as you know, with snowboarding, you need to be on your front foot in hard snow. And it took me a long time to figure that out.
You mentioned a sideways lifestyle. How does surfing play into Jeremy Jones' life?
So surfing has been a part of my life since I was about 12. I've never lived at the beach. I mean, in Cape Cod, I was 45 minutes from the beach, but no one had, my parents were not going to just drive me to the beach to go surfing. So, but really fell in love with surfing, even though I struggled at it for a long time. And it's a really nice complement to snowboarding where all winter I zap my legs and get every last ounce of energy out of them. And then to be able to go to the coast and be in the ocean and use my arms and give my legs a break, it became a really big part of like a regrounding and kind of healing mentally and physically and recharging my batteries for winter. And since I've had kids, I'm surfing less, but I'm probably in the water 30 to 40 days a year.
It makes sense that you're getting in the water that much and getting to surf. Jones kind of has that message, with the surf-inspired shapes, teaming up with Chris Christensen. It's organic. It actually feels right. Some of the other brands were like, oh, we're just going to make surf shapes, but it didn't really transition right. Those same carves that you do, sometimes surfing and snowboarding are so similar, but it does truly take somebody that surfs to understand the difference.
Yeah, it's the surfing side of things, whether it's skateboard, on pavement, on water, on snow. It's all such similar movements. And you definitely, I think there's been an influence in surfing in snowboarding for a long time. But, those old winter stick days, for sure, pretty direct correlation. But I really wanted more than just like, hey, let's put a surf graphic on a board and cut a swallowtail into it. I'm like, I want to get in a shaping room and shape a snowboard with a shaper the same way that they shape surfboards. And I wanted to do that with Jones out of the gate, and I struggled with finding the right shaper. Because I wanted, them to have the right connection to snow, that really snow was part of their life, and obviously surf was part of their life. And Chris ended up being the perfect guy for that.
That's pretty solid that you've got the relationship with Chris. As far as manufacturing, Jones Snowboards, you guys have been pretty upfront about your supply chain and where your products are coming from. This year at the Outdoor Retailer Trade Show, one of the snowboard brands actually was making stickers, and it said, our boards are made here, not here. And it had a picture of a world map, and it showed, China and Dubai and Tunisia and the United States and Austria. And I was just wondering kind of what your thoughts are on that and why Jones as a brand is as upfront about where your products are being built and where the supplies are coming from.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have nothing to hide. We want to be totally transparent with our customers. We take our manufacturing very serious, obviously. I mean, that's behind everything. It's been a wild ride. We just turned 10 and we're on our 4th factory now. And so I've learned a ton through that process. I don't know how deep you want to go into that. I'm totally happy to share with, our decision making on where we are and what we're doing.
Man, Jeremy, let's go deep. Whatever you can tell us would be rad.
All right, I will try to be succinct. basically, first boards were made in Switzerland at the Hardaker factory. That factory got moved they opened up a Tunisian factory. That ended up where we started making boards there. Got very close with the people that were making our boards and recognized the importance of those jobs on them, but it was a real struggle to get consistent product out of there. It was like you'd fix one thing and next thing would go wrong, and the Hardaker's were like, man, there's a lot of factories out there that need boards. Let's get out of manufacturing and work with existing factories that have a ton of open space. So we moved to Austria, to this GST, which is one of the oldest factories in the world. And to be clear, like, our goal is always, we're not in this price point game. Our goal is, where can we make the best snowboards? It's just that simple. And they cost what they cost. If someone yells at me about the price, it's like, that, sure, well, we make it cheaper, but we're going to have to compromise on materials. Boards cost what they cost. So we never develop a board and say it needs to be at this price point. We develop a board and figure out what it costs once it's done. But anyways, moving to Austria was very interesting because the snowboard world was like, oh my, yeah, that's rad. You guys are in Austria. It was really heartbreaking for me because basically we had provided jobs in Tunisia that were super important. And these guys had a ton of pride. It brought them from poverty to middle class. And it was so sad because I knew, these guys, it was I shed a lot of tears out of moving out of Tunisia, which from a distance was like, the snowboard world loved that move, but I recognized how important those jobs were in Tunisia. And it was going to really change some lives. Go to Austria. Loved the owner of the factory, been in sport forever, but we were struggling because he was having a hard time staying in business. So it was a really stressful time for him. He did not want to take government subsidies. So as we were pushing him, we knew we wanted to bring in this 3D stuff. We knew we had all these things we wanted to do. We're in, what's considered largely one of the best factories in the world. And he was like, I can't invest in this stuff. We started buying some key machinery for him. And eventually he had to close the doors. Very sad. Also, with him, here's a guy who he's a lifetime snowboarder, gave his life to it, and he was crushed. But I remember talking to him and going, well, what about the employees? And he's like, these guys, the government will take care of them until they find another job. So as we move, every time we always look at the best factories around the world. There are about 7 to 8 factories. So we looked at the Elan factory closed which is a factory we looked at closely after Tunisia, and then looked at some different factories. One in Austria we looked at really close, and it didn't make sense, and it was definitely the right decision not to be there. There's a Poland factory we really liked, but it was heavily subsidized. And what happens when a factory subsidizes, they infuse it with some money and with the idea that factory is going to be up and running. And then they say, we're not going to subsidize. There's maybe an election changes and things can close down fast, which is how the Elan factory closed down fast. So went to Asia, looked at the Asian factories, and it was big kind of conglomerates, weren't nice product, but couldn't get full transparency from the factories, from, worker rights to getting them to embrace, say, FSC and these different kind of manufacturing practices and audits and what have you, which I would say, just a side note, which I find very interesting, that like China is kind of okay, but now that brings us to Dubai, where Dubai is considered lower than China. That's a very uneducated statement. So anyways, we go to Dubai, last place I thought we would end up. Family-owned factory, owner snowboards, lay out all this stuff, see the factory. It's really modern. They've taken kind of some of the top guys from Austria, some of the best machinery from Austria, got them to bring some of our machinery from Austria, fully committed on advanced, kind of embracing this 3D stuff that we wanted to do, fully committed to go to FSC, which is sustainably harvested wood, which is really hard because it's easy to buy sustainably harvested wood. It's to get a factory approved for that, they have to rework their factory so no wood cores get switched, because then how can you, it's very easy to be like, oh, we bought some sustainably harvested wood and made a switch. There's a ton of regulations in that. You get these audits, unannounced audits, Same with bioresin, which we've been wanting to do for a long time. That's an incredibly hard thing to embrace because you got to basically bleed all the lines. The resin is the most important ingredient in a snowboard. It keeps it together. We need durable snowboards. It's super important. But anyway, so we want to embrace renewable energy. They go, we'll go 100% solar. And then what it really comes down to is who are the workers? And will you get this fair trade certificates and, long list of stuff that China was like, we will not touch that. They sign on to that, but it's like, what's behind the workers, which is very important. So it's these employees, they're from Nepal and India. They come, they work for 10 months, they go home for 2 months, they have plane tickets back and forth, to go home. And, I call my buddy in Nepal, what's this job mean to a Nepali person? Comes back to me, that is a very important job for a Nepali person. It takes them from poverty to middle class. So I guess to finish this long thought is, as we're going through this, we're getting our split boards, and it's pretty easy to make sample split boards tight. It's really hard to make, hundreds of really tight split boards. There's you can imagine, like everything is basically down to the 0.5 millimeter. There's no tolerances. So we're going through this stuff. The boards are coming out, and instantly we're monitoring the splits and how tight they are on the production run. And we're going, damn, these things are like, it was such a step up from Austria. And we're like, how are they doing this? And it came down to the fact that they really value their job and they have a ton of pride in it. And the TLC they put into the manufacturing is seen in every Jones board you hold. So I'll stop there.
You had mentioned the, conglomerates and these big factories that are manufacturing. Sometimes what we're seeing is, a factory or a company saying, okay, we're going to allow this factory to manufacture our boards. And it's kind of sight off scene. And what's to stop another company to come in and say, hey, what specs do you guys have? This year at the Powwow or the Jackson Hole Shaper Summit, I met somebody from GP87, and he was just mentioning that his factory actually manufactures boards for most of the boards in the industry. So at that point, a lot of the boards are pretty darn similar. We also saw this with a company called Goodwin at the trade show a few years ago, and they came out, they were downstairs, tucked into the textile area, and they had this line of outerwear that was just absolutely stunning. And I couldn't believe it. I said, well, how are you guys just coming out and this is your stuff, from day one? And they said, well, our factory manufactures for the North Face. So you kind of run into that, and then you look at a site like Alibaba, and you can go on there, and right now the entire Karua snowboards line, all those really killer shapes, they're $100 a pop. So stuff like that's really interesting. As far as Jones Snowboards, do you feel that there's an opportunity to manufacture here in the United States a board that might come with a higher price point, $2,000, and is that something that your consumer is looking for right now?
I made it a point every time we moved. I'm like, we got to start all new molds. I'm changing them. I used it as an opportunity to change the boards, and so we were rapidly able to. I turned it into a positive every time. The factory would be like, no, dude, we got to work really hard just to make that exact board again. Don't be changing anything. And I'm like, I'm not buying the exact same mold. And then even just like, it'd be great to do a model in the U.S. And it just comes down to there are some, say, private factories in the U.S. who, and there's some amazing craftsmen that their life is crafting these snowboards in their personal factory, not this like mass production factory. And I think it's great. But as far as going, like, I could go and open up a factory in Reno, but it would have to be the center of my life, and it's very hard. I'd rather, is it going to be the best snowboard in the world? I mean, we're utilizing technology and infrastructure that is significant because they are being made collectively with other, we can share some costs. So is the board going to be better? Does the customer want to pay more for a board with, say, less technology? And that's a great question because at the end of the day, it gets passed on to the customer. So we will, I guess you as a consumer, if, are you going to pay $100 more for a board, of less quality because it's made in the U.S.? And you may, but then it's like, we're closer to Europe where we do more boards in Europe than we do in the U.S. So, and then we do a lot in Asia and we're closer to Asia. So again, so the fact that I chose to be a global company, is you can't like pound this backyard deal and then be a global, I mean, you can, you do whatever you want. And then the other question is the U.S. job more important than the job for the Nepali person?
Wow. I never really thought of it. That's a heavy way to look at it.
I mean, I can't, that's not for me to decide, but I do have I don't know. I mean, yes, I love America. I go to the 4th of July parade, but I also consider myself a citizen of the world.
I like that a lot. I've had similar talks with Patagonia about manufacturing in the United States. I'm sure Patagonia could figure out a way to manufacture in the United States and charge a premium. Would that customer pay for that? That's to be determined. This day and age, we do live in a global economy, so I do see what you're saying about the labor. All right, let's switch gears. What about your relationship with Pomoka Skins, and why is it important for a splitboard manufacturer to work with the skin company or to be sending out skins that are already custom cut for your splitboards?
We really enjoy working with them, and the skins have been, as you know, anyone that splitboards, man, the skins are so critical, and the reality is there's a point in, where eventually all skins fail. It might take 10 years, it might take what have you, but they have a shelf life, which basically means that they're at some point down the line, you're going to have skin failure and you're going to be really pissed at whatever skin is made. But for us, we spent a ton of time, testing skins, and it's a really hard thing to do because I would get 60 days in on a pair of skins and be like, yeah, the skins are awesome. And then all of a sudden, 60 days in, they're not awesome. And you're like, damn. The only way if a skin can last hundreds of days is to put them on snow hundreds of days. So we basically, same deal. We seeked out to find the best skins we could find. And that has led us to Pomoka. We've really enjoyed working with them, and they like that we push them on this kind of like finding that we're obsessed with the right amount of glide to stick ratio and then the right amount of glue. We've been tinkering with our glue to have as much as possible, but there is this breaking point where you go too far and then glue is sticking to the board. And so it's been we've been fine tuning our skins for a while now.
Well, it's good to know that I'm not the only one that has that love-hate relationship with the splitboard skins. It's kind of weird. I mean, you can go out, like you said, you can have a couple good days, 50 days, 60 days, all of a sudden, day number 61, it goes to shit. You can take it out on a wet day. It was good yesterday. It was nice and cold. All of a sudden today, it's, 30, 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and the skin has failed. And then last but not least, this is something that the manufacturers just really aren't seeming to listen to me with, or maybe they are. One of the reasons that Jones Splitboards work is you guys got more of a camber, more of a flatter profile underfoot, and it's not as wavy. When you start putting too many waves, the rocker camber, profile, the mix of the mix of the mix, all of a sudden now you're giving these points of contact where your skin can fail. And that's where typically we're starting to see these skins fail. Some brands, again, are more focused on making splitboards for going downhill, and they're really forgetting about the uphill, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah, I've never thought of like what you just said as far as these like kind of points in the profile that I can totally see how there'd be this like extreme wear point. Yeah, I don't know. Skin stuff is complicated, and all I can say is I do feel confident in saying that, our skins and our split boards are tested excessively. And my wife's sick of hearing me say I got to go test split boards, but I'm pretty confident. I don't want to say we test them more than anyone, but that stuff is heavily vetted amongst myself and the team and our employees. I mean, I have some employees that split 100 days a year. So pow surfing, I have, right out of the office, right out of the house. And then the closest trailhead is 5 minutes away, and the closest resort would be 10 minutes away.
So right now there's 3 current splitboard manufacturers in the United States. We've got Spark R&D. Spark R&D is the sponsor of this website. Shout out to Will. We've got Karakoram. Those guys make killer bindings. And then the new player, Union. You seem to have been riding Karakoram since day one. Why is that? And do you have any ownership in that brand?
Yeah, so full disclaimer, I have a very small shared ownership in Karakoram, but I started riding the product well before that. But first of all, because I get this question all the time, what's the best interface? They all work. And so I am never out there going, you need to switch or what have you. Like, they all have pluses, they all have minuses, but they're all great interfaces. So what I personally like about Karakoram is I like that it's this active closure, so it sucks the board together, meaning the bindings aren't just, say, floating on the board. Anyone that's ever put a Karakoram on it, you snap the thing together and you get a lot of just tighten it, further tightens the connection of the split board, which is really nice when it comes to torsional stiffness. And then I don't know the Union guys, but I know Will from Spark, who is awesome. And then I'm obviously very close with the Karakoram guys. And I guess the thing with Karakoram, I went to them first because I love the connection. And then I realized their commitment to evolving and going, like, really thinking outside the box and, this idea. And it's very much of, like, say, our Jones boards is, where we are today and where we're going to be in 5 years, we're going to be in a totally different place. And, yeah, there are radical changes every year, not at all, but it's these little changes that happen consistently that next thing you know, when you do compare a board from year 1 to year 5, now you do have quite a bit of you're dealing with a different board. And the same with the Karakoram bindings is I'm just really impressed with their engineering background and their willingness and really drive to be like, we're just getting started. Let's keep kicking ass on this stuff and let's keep making it better.
Yeah, Tyler and Bryce, those guys over at Karakoram, I mean, they've got such that engineering background. I mean, if anything, they're almost kind of like dorks. And, the reason that splitboarding is evolving as quick as it is we've got people like that involved in the industry. We've got Will over at Spark, and we've got what you guys are doing. Wally at Volet, he was the innovator at first, but they kind of fell by the wayside and don't really seem to be doing much innovation. But now you've got all these people kind of tinkering and coming up with their own stuff, and the progression is just incredible. You don't really feel like you're out there on a clanky setup anymore. Instead, these are boards that ride as good, if not better, than some of the resort boards. This past year, I went up to Nelson, British Columbia, and I took the Mind Expander split. And I was up there to go heli skiing and to go cat skiing. And the first couple days I showed up with my Mind Expander and my Union bindings, people kind of looked at me weird, and I thought, God, this is just one of the raddest setups. It just rides so good. So yeah, as far as going downhill right now, split boards are definitely riding pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, I vividly remember when we were testing, because we do test boards at resorts, splits at resorts to kind of get the quick, we're out touring with them a ton, but then it's really nice where we will do resort sessions with it. And I remember there was a point where we were doing this flagship solution test, and I kind of spent my morning on a flagship, finishing up a test that had been going on for a couple of days, and then I moved into the solution test, and it was really kind of full hard pack, hadn't snowed in a long time. And I'm like, oh man, I don't want to get off this flagship. Get on the Solution, and I'm like, holy shit, this thing rides as good as this flagship. Like, we finally have done it, where we are making splits that ride as good as solids. And in some scenarios, I think they actually ride a little better. Having that little bit extra weight, I feel like they can kind of push through some crust a little better than a solid.
I like that you mentioned the Solution. I've actually got the Solution Splitboard here mounted up, ready to go, and full review coming out. It actually just won the award for Best Snowboard of the Year, Best Splitboard of the Year. I think it's kind of like the Burton Custom of snowboards. It's just a board that, everybody at some point will end up riding.
Right. I don't, I haven't been on the Custom, but obviously it's a super well-respected board. And yes, for me, that board is like, so a great example, I go to ISPO every year and I always stay and snowboard. I bring one board, even if it's like, oh, we might be at a resort more than splitboarding. I don't care. I don't need to bring a solid for the resort and a split for the backcountry. And then with the Solution, it's like at my home resort, I'm always riding alternative stuff. I rarely ride a flagship or even a Solution until it comes spring and it's like time to get down to the real business and the big mountains where you're going to have every type of conditions, and then it's a no-brainer. Or if I'm traveling, it's a no-brainer. A Solution is going in the bag.
Aside from being the owner of Jones Snowboards, why does Jeremy Jones go splitboarding? What does splitboarding mean to you, or what does it do for you?
Oh God, splitboarding it's like my power center. It's my happy place. It's where I work out my thoughts. It's where I get rejuvenated. It's where I get challenged. It's where I clear my head. It's the best form of connecting with nature for me. It makes my, just kind of lights up my brain. It makes my body feel better. And I think last year I snowboarded more than I have in 20 years. And it's just, it's always new. Every day is different. With a splitboard, you can always see and find new terrain. There's always a new way to, even at, say, familiar trailheads, to work it a little bit different. The splitboarding is so integral to me as a human, and it would be hard to imagine life, taking that out of my life.
Wow, you can really hear that passion in your voice when you talk about splitboarding. I definitely feel the same way, and I think anybody that goes out splitboarding that first time just absolutely gets touched, and so addicting and so amazing. As far as, we are going out in the backcountry and people are going into avalanche terrain, what is Jones Snowboards' responsibility in all this? I know as a brand, you guys have put out safety messages. You've got the 5 warning signs. I've got a little sticker on my fridge. I've got something on my front door. Do you see in the future a way that a brand like Jones Snowboards could partner with one of the avalanche centers or with ARI or an avalanche course provider to get a discount on a course, or even better, teaming up with an REI and just having a full circle? Okay, you're going to buy this splitboard. We're going to make sure that you get the instructions on how to use it.
That's interesting. I mean, we work with, I don't want to say every, but the majority of the avalanche organizations around the world, because at Jones, we hope to inspire people to get out there, but we also recognize that with that comes the responsibility of educating them. And we look at it as almost a pillar in our marketing, where backcountry awareness and education will always be a part of our marketing efforts, in the sense of educating people. And so it's just as it is, as I've been doing it for a long time, I'm constantly learning and constantly evolving. We will do the same at Jones. So yeah, we really support these AVI forecast centers, and will continue to.
So outside of carrying, the typical rescue safety equipment, the beacon shovel probe, what else can Jeremy Jones give us some advice on? What do you like to carry with you into the backcountry for a day of touring?
I always go what I call water heavy and food heavy. I mean, I shouldn't say food heavy, but I always have food. I like to always have the option to like be walking home at the end of the day and be like, whoa, look at that sunset lap. Let's go. And make sure that I'm not out of water, because if I'm running out of water or running out of food and I'm bonking, yeah, you can get through that day, but it affects your next day. And I like the all day, every day program. And so I'd say I'm a little excessive on water and always have a stash of Cliff Bars in my pack. The only other thing that I would say in there outside of like the basic first aid and stuff is I have this somewhere device, which is, we have, at least where we are, there's very little cell service in the range. And as you go in to recognize, through these avalanche courses and such, communication is critical in the mountains if something does go wrong. So this little somewhere device basically, it has an SOS button. It turns your phone into a sat phone, and it's very much like a Garmin, but it's smaller and lighter. InReach I think it's the InReach is what it's like.
So this is actually a standalone device that works with an app on your cell phone, correct?
Exactly. But if, say, your cell phone dies, you can hit this SOS button that alerts the kind of how a spot device used to work, or maybe still does. I don't know.
And how about reception if you're touring through like thick trees?
Well, this is a very powerful GPS beacon. So, yeah, you may, I'll use it when I'm on long trips to, say, send text messages to my wife. So we're common that we're camped in a meadow or in a valley in the trees. As far as like super thick trees, I've never sent anything out from there, but definitely I've sent stuff out from deep valleys.
All right, Jeremy. Well, last but not least, what is POW, Protect Our Winters, and why should listeners of this podcast be paying attention to the initiatives that you guys are doing?
Protect Our Winters is focused on uniting the outdoor community to turn their passion into purpose and come together and act on climate and demand, real climate action, CO2 reduction from our elected officials. We have a climate activist roadmap, and on that, for sure, talks about personal carbon footprint, but we recognize that real change needs to happen at with our leaders. And what's hamstringing us from fully embracing tackling climate change and CO2 reduction is that half our elected officials are supported by the fossil fuel industry and doing everything they can to keep us on this business as usual, high carbon burning path to nowhere.
And are you guys still offering like carbon offsets for that snowboarder, that splitboarder that plans to, maybe go up to Haines or maybe go do some heli skiing and understands that what they're doing does come at a cost, but wants to try and buy into offsetting that?
Yeah, so we do carbon offsetting. I'm not sure. I don't know. Definitely, we have an internal platform. I'm not sure if it's public. I know we're going to make it public. There's a lot of offsets out there. And, yeah, so it's very, for us, for example, at Jones, we're part of 1% for the planet. So 1% of the retail price of every board we put towards environmental efforts. One is, so a portion of that goes to Protect Our Winters, and a portion of that goes to, we've been working with a group down in Costa Rica that is a leader in rainforest reforestation. And so we have a thriving Jones rainforest that gets bigger every year. And I guess I bring that up because it's an example of, this carbon offset stuff. You really got to do your homework and understand where your money goes. But I have seen the benefits of this collective effort of what money can do as far as doing a positive thing for the planet.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving so much insight into yourself and the manufacturing process with Jones, and just kind of, where you're at with splitboarding. We're so lucky to have people like you and Will. And, Will went out and made a splitboard binding because he wasn't happy with the current binding. And so that came from a passion place first. I got really lucky. I started this blog. I would do this one way or another if I was making money or not. And all of a sudden I got lucky. I stuck with it. It's now a full-time job. I'm super stoked. And we've got people like yourself and all these other, really innovative manufacturers in splitboarding and snowboarding. And one of the things, we look at sustainability. Recently, I met Yvon Chouinard and we were talking about sustainability, and he mentioned that he actually hates the word sustainability. It was wild. I couldn't even believe it, but he understands that this is broken. And that's where I see that Jones snowboard. I've got boards here that are 3-4 years old. They're going to still be good for many years to come. And if for some reason I can't no longer use those boards, there's definitely a second life and a second home for those boards to be used. So keep up all the good work, Jeremy. We really appreciate everything that you're doing for splitboarding. And I'm super excited to go out and take a lap on the Solution. I think there's probably about 3 feet of fresh snow up on Togety right now. So peace.
No, I'm jealous for you, and I love that the board's holding up. We work hard on that. And I would just echo, I truly think of us in the golden age of snowboarding as far as, the technology of splitboarding. Yes, it's more crowded, but the equipment is so good that it's easier than ever to get away from the crowd. So as I do a lot of work on the environment. It's overwhelming, but I do think it's important to pause and just say it's good to be alive today. We're fortunate to be alive today. And especially you, I'm slightly jealous. Make a turn for me.
Well, thanks, Jeremy, for calling in. That was a really, really fun interview. That wraps it up for episode number 35 of the Everything Snowboarding and More podcast. Be sure to tune in next week. This episode, once again, was proudly sponsored by our friends over at Spark R&D. Spark R&D are the makers of the most reliable, badass splitboard bindings on the market, or at least that's my opinion. Check out the Arc Pro, or the Surge Pro for a little bit of a bigger dude. They've got chick bindings, hard boots, accessories, all sorts of killer stuff. SparkRnd.com. Again, thanks for tuning in. Episode number 35 of the Everything Snowboarding and More podcast.